Welcome to another edition of Newsmaker. I'm Susan Yaki in Washington with VOA Middle East. The so-called Arab Spring may be changing the political face of the Middle East, but in Syria, it has brought widespread reports of human rights atrocities. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets of the nation demanding the overthrow of President Bashar al-Assad's autocratic rule. Outside news media coverage is being denied, but one group monitoring the situation as it can is Human Rights Watch. Joe Stork, Deputy Director of their Middle East and North Africa Division, recently sat down with me, and here is some of what he had to say. Welcome, Joe.
Glad to be with you.
What has Human Rights Watch found in Syria?
We found a pattern of very serious human rights crimes. Widespread enough, systematic enough that we think they cross the threshold to count basically as crimes against humanity. We documented this in particular in the southern town of Daraa near the Jordanian border. We put out a short report a few weeks ago which talked about systematic killings, torture of people, routine torture of people who were detained, arrests simply for expressing political opinions. And clearly that's something that's been going on in other places as well throughout the country.
How many people are you talking about?
In the case of Daraa, we were talking about upwards of around 400 people, if I recall correctly. I mean, quite a large number for a relatively small place.
Well, the unrest has also led to a flood of refugees heading for Turkey. What can you tell us about that situation?
Well, there, up in the northwest of the country, near the Turkish border, you had a situation develop where there was, at some point, protesters acquired arms of some sort. By some accounts, some soldiers had defected to the rebel side, if you want to call it that. In any case, soldiers were killed. Frankly, we don't know very much about what actually happened there because we can't get in, independent journalists can't get in, so we get contradictory accounts. I mean, according to the Syrian government, it was armed terrorist rebels who killed these poor Syrian soldiers. According to some of the accounts of protesters, it was soldiers who defected who were then killed by under the command of Syrian officers. So we don't know exactly what happened, but clearly there was arms were used on both sides, and there was a fairly large death toll, it seems. I mean, we're talking about a score of people or more, and yes, and then you had this huge influx of people or outflow of people across the border into Turkey as the Syrian army moved in force with armed helicopter gunships, warplanes, tanks, everything they could throw at this place in order to sort of retake that town.
Well, let's just assume for a moment that President Bashar al-Assad steps down. What does this do you think, to the human rights situation in Syria?
Well, you're asking for predictions.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go there. Frankly, we have been unable to get into Syria for many years now. Our sense of sort of what under what circumstances would he step down? Under what circumstances would he leave power? Obviously, that would have a lot to do with how to characterize the human rights situation. If it's a situation of armed conflict in many parts of the country, yes, the situation I expect would be extremely dire for civilians wherever those clashes would be taking place. So that would be something to be watching out for. Him stepping down and sort of being replaced by, shall we say, Assad light, another somebody else from the family or close to the family or close to the military who sort of shares the governing modes of the Assad family, that wouldn't be too good either. So, is there there are many talented Syrians, Syrian Democrats, who, under the right circumstances, I think could make up a kind of transitional or interim body that could set the stage for constitutional reform, for democratic elections, and so forth. I mean, that would obviously be the best solution.
With the situation so dangerous in Syria, how do you do an investigation in a place like that? Walk us through it a little bit, where you get your information from.
Well, to the extent that we can, we would go inside, or find people who could go inside for us. We would. We talked before about refugees, about people coming, displaced persons coming across the border. They were coming across the border into Jordan earlier when the fighting, the clashes were down in the southwest, in the Daraa area. They're now going into Turkey, so we have people there who are meeting with people, finding out what their experiences were, getting contacts of people still in the country who we might be able to telephone or otherwise make contact with. But basically, that's how we do it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming to our studios today.
My pleasure.